Are you a new photographer who's passionate about creating beautiful photos, but feel instead that your pictures are maybe not just really hitting the mark? Well, don't worry, because you're certainly not alone. And in fact, most beginner photographers tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. So in this video, I'm going to reveal the top 5 mistakes that new photographers make, and most importantly, I'll give you the fix so you can avoid making these mistakes with your own photography. My name's Steve, welcome to Behind the Tripod, and let's start turning those mistakes into masterpieces. So mistake number 1 is not understanding exposure. You see, exposure is made up of 4 components, the first being light and the other 3 being something that we photographers call the exposure triangle. Now, I've got a whole video dedicated to the exposure triangle, and if you've never heard of aperture, shutter speed or ISO, then please check it out. But assuming that you know what the exposure triangle actually is, how can you check your exposure in the middle of a hectic shoot? Well, this is where the histogram comes in, and you've guessed it, I've also got a video that breaks down the histogram, which you can see right here. But it really is worth spending some time learning your way around the histogram if you want to level up your photography. Now, there are many different ways to use the histogram to create certain effects within your camera, which I'll cover in a future video, but for beginners, the ideal exposure to aim for would be a nice even wave in the center of the histogram, which should result in a nice evenly exposed image. Right, on to begin mistake number 2, which is ignoring the importance of composition. This is a really good one because this one thing can instantly transform your photographs, even if you shoot on auto or with your phone and don't really understand anything else about photography. Just by learning a few basic and easy to apply principles, you can quickly take your images up to the next level. The first and the easiest rule to follow is the rule of thirds, and I've got a whole video dedicated to the rule of thirds, which you can find out above. But as a quick refresher, I want you to imagine you've got 2 horizontal and 2 vertical lines across your image. Now, for maximum effect, place your elements on the lines, or to supercharge the effect, place the elements where those lines intercross. Other compositional tips that you can use as a beginner include checking the corners for distractions, making sure that lines such as footpaths, walls and shadows lead into the image and not out of it, and allowing space around your subject to avoid cluttering your frame with lots of distracting stuff. Now, composition is a massive subject and would easily fill several very long videos, but these few simple tips can make a huge difference, particularly if you're just starting out on your photography journey, which leads us nicely into mistake number 3, overlooking focal lengths. Now, focal lengths are the number in millimeters that you see on the side of your camera lens. The lens on this camera, for example, has a focal length of between 24 and 70. Now, the thing you need to remember with these numbers is that the lower the focal length, the wider the angle of the shot, which means you get much more within your image. The higher the number, the more zoom you get and the less you can see within your lens. But as a quick example, I want you to make a circle with your finger and thumb and place it around your eye. Now, the measurement between your finger and your thumb is going to be the focal length, and we're going to call this 0 in this case. Now, look through the circle, and this will be considered a wide angle, and you can see pretty much all of your surroundings within that circle. But now I want you to pull your hand away, which increases the focal length, and I just want you to notice what happens as you move your hand further and further away. You see, effectively, we're increasing the focal length, and you'll start to see less and less of your surroundings through the circle, and the center will become more focused. Now, before we move on to mistake number 4, if you're enjoying this video, please give me a thumbs up, as it really does help YouTube to know to suggest this video to other beginner photographers just like you. And I make videos to help beginner photographers take share-worthy photographs regularly on this channel. So if you'd like to see more, please remember to subscribe. Right, back to the list. And we're straight in at number 4, which is something that I see all the time. It's misunderstanding the camera modes. You see, that auto mode is a safe place to be as a new photographer, but learning to shoot in either aperture or shutter priority mode will be a complete game changer for you, and it'll open up a whole world of camera effects and creative possibilities that you just can't get in the auto mode. It's also the first step to understanding the fully manual mode, which is where you get to control everything about your exposure, such as your depth of field and motion blur, but that's for another video. Oh, which conveniently you can find above. And finally, the one that some people find a bit controversial, mistake number 5, which is not using post-processing tools. Now, it's a common misconception amongst many photographers that in the good old days of film photography, photographers always got it right in camera and didn't do any post-processing work in the darkroom at all. They just turned what their camera saw into a print, and oh, how it was such an honest time in photography. Now, I'm sorry if I'm about to completely destroy your rose-tinted view of the film photography past, but this simply was never the case in photography. Photographers have always been editing and touching up their images since probably the dawn of photography. A great example was Frank Hurley, who was famous for photographing Shackleton's Antarctic expedition on the Endurance and for his First World War pictures. He was a master photo editor in the darkroom and really specialised in something called composite printing. And of course, no discussion around post-processing work in the days of film could be complete without mentioning Ansel Adams, the godfather of landscape photography. He was a master photographer and darkroom editor, and once famously said that dodging and burning are steps to take care of mistakes God made in establishing tonal relationships. So you see, please don't ever feel pressure of always getting it right in camera. Instead, set yourself free from those creative shackles and learn to edit well. Editing is and always has been one of the fundamental skills in photography. And guess what? Yep, I've got a playlist to help you learn some of the basics that you can find above. So I hope that you can see that with a little bit of knowledge and lots of practice, you can very quickly elevate your photography to the next level. You see, there's no magic to photography, and with just a little knowledge around exposure, composition, focal lengths, and camera settings, as well as experimenting with post-processing, you can quickly see a huge improvement in your photography, particularly if you're a beginner. But before you shoot off, I've got a couple of questions for you. What are you struggling most with photography at the moment? And have you made any of the mistakes that I've mentioned before? And also, what are your thoughts on editing? I'd love to hear from you, and I read every message, so please leave me a comment below. And if you'd like some constructive feedback on your images and would like to also perhaps meet some very passionate photographers of all different levels who love to talk photography and help each other out on their creative journeys, then please join our Facebook community. Just search for Behind the Tripod Facebook group or follow the link below. And if you'd like to learn more about photography, you could watch one of these helpful videos here.